Welcome everyone to the Pure Degeneracy first episode podcast and YouTube show. My name is Adam Glick, joined with my good friend Ethan Weingart. We're here to talk sports, to bet sports, to sweat sports. We're excited to get this thing going. Ethan, how are you doing on this beautiful September 21st Thursday afternoon?
That was the best introduction I've ever heard in my life. That was
Love it.
incredible. That got me so fired up. Like, wow, I'm ready to talk some sports and be a degenerate.
Yeah, and
This
it's been so great because football is finally back. The summer months without football is so grueling and so hard. So
It's
it's
so brutal. And
yeah,
like the first thing that I remember just feeling like, damn, football is back is when the NFL posted on Instagram something like, "Oh, thank God we did it." But this season has started off weird. Like, I feel like it started off because there's been so many injuries. Like, I figured the first thing we could talk about was literally just now, Trayvon Diggs
yeah.
done, ACL gone, and I'll probably throw in a couple of Texans bits as we go along because I'm a big Texans fan. But Texans are dealing with even though we're not good, dealing with a ton of injuries. Derek Stingley out like 6 to 8 weeks. I saw for a hamstring and just stuff. Jalen Petrie bruised lung, just like and like obviously aside from the Texans, huge stars already out in the NFL. It's tough. It's been a tough start to the season, but still excited. Football's back. College football's back. We are back.
Yeah, and we'll get into both of them. Obviously, this show is gonna be football and basketball based, but until basketball starts, we'll just really talk about NFL and college football specifically. Right
Yeah.
now, obviously, if we grow and you wanna other people want us to talk about different sports, we will, but for right now, we'll stick to just football, and as you talked about, Ethan, just the magnitude of these injuries, not just players getting hurt, but the magnitude of those injuries and how long they're gonna be out for has been really hard to see, especially, watching that game the other night, Nick Chubb out
Oh
for the
yeah.
year. Hopefully, he plays football again, but,
And
that
even show the injury
yeah,
for
I mean, it
his.
already happened to him when he was in college, so it's
Yeah.
just really
Yep.
hard to see, but we'll start honestly, with, tonight's big game because the San Francisco 49ers are playing the New York Giants Thursday Night Football, and, before we get into the betting aspect of this game, both these teams have really taken on 2 different directions, this season. Niners have been really good. Defense has been stellar, putting up points as well. Purdy's been awesome. Giants had to have an incredible comeback against the NFL's probably worst team last week. They've had all kinds of problems, another injury, Saquon Barkley. So, what are you expecting tonight in San Francisco?
Well, I was thinking about it earlier. First of all, with the 49ers, I mean, the Texans, again, I said I'd probably talk about them. The Texans took a lot of key pieces from the 49ers in the offseason. We got our offensive coordinator now was the passing game coordinator, Bobby Slowick. I mean, the offenses look very, very good for the most part. It seems like it's constantly improving. Obviously, our head coach, D'Amico Ryans, was a huge part of the 49ers defense. And then Jimmy Ward starting safety. So, and I know that, other players and coaches came and went to other teams and, what have you. But Kyle Shanahan is the man. And he, regardless of all the pieces that he lost, they still look like, a significant and dominant team in the NFL. And obviously they still have, Brock Purdy seems like he hasn't really skipped a beat because he had that tough injury in the playoffs. And they still got Fred Warner, McCaffrey, Ayuk and Debo Samuel. Like they're firing on all cylinders. George Kittle, obviously, they're firing on all cylinders. So um, I'm expecting obviously a 49ers dub. However, the Giants, I don't know. The Giants looked promising last year. I honestly, I'm blank. Did they make the playoffs last year? I'm blank.
They did, and people forget that they were the most underrated playoff team.
Right. And they like I watched some of their games last year and they looked like their play calling looked pretty good. I'm not going to lie. And especially with they had some kind of questionable pieces on offense. I feel like besides for Saquon and Daniel Jones, but I thought they were kind of in for a big year, and then obviously the game one versus the Cowboys just completely destroyed my fantasy week because I have like on one of my teams I have three Cowboys players and they really didn't do anything. Prescott, Tony Pollard, and Brandon Cooks, they didn't do anything because the defense was so dominant against the Giants. They just completely took the Giants out of the game. And then you talked about the huge comeback versus the Cardinals. It's just tough because it's the Cardinals,
Yeah.
So like you would expect them to win that game, and they fell in such an early hole. So I'm proud of them for getting out of it. I'm very curious to see what this game looks like, though. I'm honestly thinking that the 49ers should win by a couple touchdowns. I feel like.
Yeah, and that's what the betting odds are kinda indicating right now. Line currently at 10.5, and let's see, is, if I can figure this out here to, share my screen. Can you see it, Ethan?
Yes, I
Yeah,
can.
okay, okay. So, just this is a DraftKings sportsbook. Want to remind everyone to bet their however much is comfortable with them, and everyone is different. But make sure you're betting responsibly, and that's what we will do and uh, talk about here on this show. But for tonight's game, the line is 10.5, as you can see here. Over under 43, it's in a half. It has creeped down. I don't have an official play with the line or the over under. I want to talk about this teaser with you, Ethan, before maybe we could talk about some of the props and maybe touchdown scores because I know you got interested in those
Yeah.
this year. But let's
I'm
talk
off to
about
such a good start. I'm off to such a good start.
exactly, exactly. So let me talk to you about this teaser because this is going to be my first official play on the podcast. So I really needed to hit.
Let's
I
do it.
have the Niners and the under. So it's a teaser. So I'm getting 6 points. Odds decrease, but so I'm getting the Niners at 10.5 down to 4.5. And I'm getting the under from 43.5 up to 49.5. So Niners minus 4.5 and the under 49.5. So it hits, obviously, if the Niners win by 5 and the game scores 49 or less points. So I'm getting 6 points. I'm losing some odds because I just don't feel comfortable with the big number of 10.5 or the low number of 43.5. But a lot of games on prime time, especially this season as well, have they go to the under because primetime, everyone's super excited. It's really the only game on the NFL slate. Everyone wants to bet that over, but honestly, most games have been going under even this season. So that's why I'm taking that teaser as of right now. But Ethan, I want to get your thoughts on this game. Any players that you might be targeting on the betting lines specifically?
Well, so first of all, just in terms of this specific game, that very interesting points about how a lot of teams have been kind of coming in at the under. I'm thinking that I may have not wanted to use Yahoo Sports to look at this, but anyway, I am thinking that with this Giants 49ers game, I really like the under 49 because I could very easily see the 49ers just dominating on all cylinders. I really could. And it, if it's a blowout, I could see it being like, I don't know, 33-7. Like I could very realistically see the 49 the Giants either not scoring at all or maybe scoring like maybe a touchdown or two, but I like that under bet a lot because I think that the 49ers should completely control this game. Can you pull up the player props and we can
Yes.
see what we're
I
looking
wa I wanted to talk to just quickly on your point because it's a good point you brought up. I saw this thing the other day that in these big spread games of maybe 10 double digits or more, the
at? Mhm.
game goes under around 70% of the time because as you talked about, the game's either close and low scoring or it's a blowout and the other team is not gonna score much. So I do like
Well,
your
I
point.
literally just said 30-7 or 33-7. So like I'm right now on my phone. I'm on Yahoo Sports. I feel like it's better for the phone. I'm looking at the 49ers last two games. This is kind of off topic. The Rams have really surprised me to start the season. I mean, the 49ers beat the Rams, but the Rams kind of hung in there. But they've dropped 30 points exactly their last two games, and versus Pittsburgh, they won 30-7. So I honestly, I kind of expected to start the season that Pittsburgh's offense, it seems like they have more weapons than the Giants do. Even though Saquon is fantastic, Darren Waller, I'm a big Darren Waller supporter, but I'm kind of expecting a similar matchup with the 49ers. I'm really thinking that they can score around 30 and hold the Giants to 10 or under. I really do think that. So
If you had to take one, as you can see, hopefully here, one
yeah,
of these Giants players, who do you think, because someone's gonna have to have a good game for the Giants
right.
to keep this
Well,
close.
again, Darren Waller, I have him on all three of my fantasy teams. It's a tough play because he's got a great story. He's a fantastic athlete and tight end in general. He just gets hurt a lot. So I read earlier today that he told the media that like he had a hamstring injury to kind of start off the year, and he said that it's completely good. He's feeling a lot better. So I like I with Darren Waller, I would probably honestly say the under because I have him. I want him to do well, but Fred Warner in coverage can be tough. The 49ers defense, who's their safety? I can't pronounce his name, but do you know with the long hair? You know what I'm talking about? Tufanga or something like that.
Yeah, I
He's
don't know
a
how to
baller.
pronounce his
He's
name
so
either.
good, and I don't know about him. You know, doing that well tonight. And let me just pull up his fantasy stats real quick. Week 2, he actually had 76 yards last week, but that was versus the Cardinals. And then week 1 versus Dallas, he was 3 for 36. So I'm honestly expecting more like along the lines of how he played versus Dallas, like three receptions, 36 yards, like in that area. Like that really would not surprise me.
Okay. I like that play. So, Ethan,
Yeah.
so the viewers, whoever, does end up watching this, what is your official play or plays in this game? I know you've talked about the under and Waller. Are those official?
I would say McCaffrey anytime score. That just seems too easy. I mean, obviously
Those the
he's
craziest odds I've ever
right.
seen.
Like he's
Yeah.
he's I don't know if I've ever seen something like that before, but Brandon Ayuk, I feel like he's been doing a lot of scoring to start off the season. Wouldn't surprise me if they get Debo in there. Debo had a sick touchdown last week where he kind of like juked someone out on the sideline and then scored. It would be nice to see him score and maybe get some George Kittle in there. I feel like he hasn't really, started the season off on like a super crazy note.
Mhm.
Maybe get a George Kittle anytime score in there.
I was gonna say, if I'm taking any of these touchdown scoring props tonight, I am taking a flyer on George Kittle at plus 175. I think that's a really good value play.
Hmm.
I do agree with you. I could see Samuel Ayuk getting in there, but
Yeah.
my official plays for this game, as we're gonna, we'll move on from this game and talk about some college in a second here. But
Mhm.
my official plays is gonna be a two-team under with the Niners minus 4.5 and the under 49.5. And I'm also going to make George Kittle anytime touchdown at plus 175 an official play for tonight's game.
Let's do it. I like
Let-
all of it. I like
Let's
all of it.
let's do it. Let's make some money. Let's have fun, and so we'll get something to sweat for Thursday night
Starting
football.
off, I feel like not necessarily pure degeneracy, but like I have a feeling
Yeah,
that
we'll
as
get there.
weeks go along, we'll get there. We'll get there.
And also, this show next week, I promise you, it won't be crazy. The house I'm at right now. This phone rings off the
It
chart.
is all good. It is all good.
Off the charts. We'll make sure that doesn't happen for next week. But just where I'm at here with my grandparents, I love them, but the phone rings like crazy here. I've
I
never
love
seen anything like it. Okay, let's move on to college football. This slate
Yes,
is incredible at every facet. I've never seen
I'm
a college
pulling it up.
football s yeah, I've never seen a college football slate like this before. I was actually in Las Vegas last week, and the slate was horrible, I'm not gonna lie to you, but this
Yeah,
week,
no, it
there are
was.
so many big time games, it's hard for me, as this show indicates, pure degeneracy, as I can't even pronounce the name, but, like, I wanna bet all these games. But let's, I have to figure out which ones I'm actually doing. The first game I wanted to talk about to you about, Ethan, and we'll
Mhm.
quickly run through this. So we don't have to do full game breakdowns here, but Florida State and Clemson going into Death Valley. Florida State looked horrible last week, scraping by Boston College, who was a bottom tier ACC team, 31-29. Jordan Travis has been incredible for Florida State. He did
Mhm.
get a little banged up, but he will play this weekend against Clemson. Clemson, everyone remembers week 1 on Monday night Labor Day. They got absolutely trounced to Duke.
Yeah.
So this line is really interesting. Florida State only -2.5. The
Yeah.
question is, do you trust Dabo and Clemson to get them right and to steer their season in the right direction? Or do you think Florida State is that legit team as we saw against LSU and they are college football bound? And I'm going to take the latter. I really think Florida State is that team. I love this group and it's going to be an official play. I'm taking a -2.5. I don't like Clemson's offense under Klubnik as their
Right.
quarterback. So Florida State is my official play in this game.
That's what I was gonna talk to you about as well. I mean, just looking at Clemson's, first 3 games, 2-1, but Dabo has the pedigree of like a Hall of Fame coach. It seems like he's done it all, but really these past couple of years, really started after Trevor Lawrence left, I would say, and they got DJ last name I will not pronounce in there. He, like, for lack of a better term, he just kinda shit the bed, and
Mhm.
it was tough to see, and then, they got Klubnik in there, I remember, a couple games last year, and he definitely showed promise, but then, week 1 versus a ranked team, 21 at Duke, he did not, come to play. He really didn't. So obviously versus like Charleston Southern and Florida Atlantic, I'm looking at their scores right now, 66-17 and 48-14. Obviously versus teams like that, he's going to probably have a better showing, which he did. But now we're back to ranked play again, and I don't know if what we saw from him versus a ranked Duke, now number 4 Florida State. I just that's a tough call. It's a tough call. I'm honestly gonna say no. I'm thinking with you that Florida State should have a pretty easy time with Clemson.
Yeah, it's tough just because it's at Clemson. If this game was
Mm,
in Tallahassee, I would love Florida State, and obviously the line would be a lot more than it is.
right.
But I do think we're getting a little help from Vegas because of how bad Florida State looked last week. If Florida State routed Boston College like they were favored to do so, I think this line would have been 4.5, 5.5 points. Instead, it's sitting at 2.5. So they just got to win by a field goal. And they're just, I think, a lot more talented than Clemson. And Dabo really hasn't gotten into the portal to really help his Clemson squad, and I think they are suffering because of it, just
Yeah.
the way college football is now. So I
Well,
love Florida.
you got to take advantage that us graduating from UT Austin, we're in the portal every
Yeah,
summer. We're locked in. So if you can't take advantage of the portal, I mean, now when we have significant playmakers on offense and defense now that we got through the portal, and if you're not taking advantage of that, nothing you can do,
yeah,
nothing you can do.
and
So
as a coach, things change all the time, but you gotta change with the times, and I don't think Dabo has done a
agreed,
good job at doing so.
agreed,
So
agreed.
we're going Florida State in this game. We'll move on here. This line is I'm gonna have to pull this up here. Maybe I'll share my screen again. UCLA, Utah in Utah, but we just got word today this morning that Cam Rising, Utah's quarterback, is supposed to play in this game, which is rather interesting. So that line has jumped a few points in Utah's direction as we had, yeah, up to 6 on our sheet. We had it at 4.5, so it's jumped by a point and a half already. Utah has looked good, but not great. They beat an interesting Florida team. They also survived against not a great Baylor team on the road, but that was without Cam Rising, who is a top-notch college football quarterback. So that's the question.
Mm,
How much are you buying into Utah because he's back, and how good is he really going to be in his first game back this season against a really talented UCLA team? Dante Moore, UCLA's quarterback, he's been really good. UCLA has looked the part in the early going. The Pac 12
yeah.
has been one of the best conferences in the non conference so far, finally get conference play.
Mm,
And Ethan, I had an official play of UCLA before the Cam Rising news, and honestly, I'm gonna stick with it because I'm even getting more points now, and I don't think Cam Rising is gonna be at his best. I think UCLA people are not believing in the hype there. I think this is a really good Bruin squad, and 6 points on the road. I think they're gonna keep it close and possibly could win this football game.
Yeah, so I mean, looking at Utah's past 3 games as well, seems like uh well, that's actually very interesting. Versus Baylor, and Baylor is not a good team this year. Their quarterback who they started, Johnson, only 82 yards passing. I don't know about that. That seems interesting out of Utah. I mean, and they only won by a touchdown too. Very interesting. And then obviously versus Weber State, you're going to get better results. But um, I honestly, I think that we're getting more into the pure degeneracy lines now here, but we'll just see how Rising plays, because Utah without Rising, they're 3-0, but they, to me, based on what I'm looking at, they haven't looked the part. So I think, if UCLA can come to play, then fantastic. But I honestly think that this game could and should be a shootout. So if Cam Rising can come back and let it rip, then we'll see. But I mean, it seems like UCLA has all the momentum. Utah may still have some things to figure out. So we'll see.
Yeah, we will see. So, if you are listening or watching this on recording, Ethan and I's official play so far on the college football slate this Saturday, which is the best of the year. That we're not going to be after this first episode. There, I guarantee you, we're not going to be talking about as many games as we're talking about here because this slate is just incredible. So our official play so far, and I'll tweet this out on my Twitter as well, is UCLA +6 now and Florida State -2.5. And the next game we got to talk about is another great game is Alabama and Ole Miss in Alabama. This is the same time slot as the UCLA game, so double sweats going on the Pacific time of 12:30, which will be a lot of fun. Old Miss and Bama, the line is at 7, as you can see here on the screen. Alabama, you want to talk about not looking the part. They have not looked the part this season. They escaped a awful, to say it bluntly, South Florida team last week, and that game was rainy. It was disgusting. But they couldn't score, and they've had quarterback issues all year long. And then against our Longhorns, where we graduated from, there were moments, there were flashes, but too many mistakes. Their offense didn't look capable. A lot of times they gave up a ton of big plays, some bad penalties. They just have really not been the Alabama that we're so accustomed to so far this year. And they're playing an Ole Miss team that can, if you want to talk about sling the ball, score points, a fun game to watch, Ole Miss football is that team for you. They beat a really good Tulane team a couple of weeks ago on the road. They will score with about anybody. The question, though, is who's going to perform? Because Alabama's defense, for the most part, other than a few times in the Texas game, has been pretty good this season. Who's going to be more fitted for this matchup? Old Miss's offense, Bama's defense, and is Milroe going to start for Alabama? A lot of different question marks to go over in this game. I'm not having an official play, honestly, in this game. I don't feel comfortable with either team, but it is at Alabama, so I would favor them still beating Lane Kiffin, a former Nick Saban disciple.
So I'm glad this is about to happen, because you are a lot more experienced in the sports betting world than I am. I would and I'm looking forward to what's about to happen. I'm going to disagree with you here. I honestly think that, based on what we've seen, because obviously we are both big Longhorn fans, we watched that game, and it's tough because I feel like there are a lot of Longhorns fans out there that are saying, "Oh, Texas is back, Texas is back." But when you watch that game, and if you're able to analyze it, you saw that the Alabama offense, as you said, really did not come to play. I mean, Jalen Milroe, it's tough because you can tell just how freakish of an athlete he is. He missed several touchdown throws. Like, he missed
Mhm.
that I could at least two wide open, like down the seam, just overthrown and they would have been touchdowns. So like had he would have made those throws, I think that that game could have been different. Even though Texas played phenomenal football, they did. And then you talked about versus South Florida, that was a prime spot for Alabama to like really come back and dominate and show what they can do. And they just didn't, they benched Jalen Milrow, which was interesting, and then they were subbing out Butchner and the other guy. Who's their other quarterback right
Simpson.
now? Huh?
Simpson.
Sims, right,
Yeah.
right. So
And
so
both of them looked horrible.
they did. They both, I didn't watch too much of that game, but I looked at their stats afterwards. Not anything to write home about at all, and that's probably putting it lightly. So I just, with Alabama, there's always so much pressure because it's kind of like Clemson, because really for the past several years it's been Dabo and Nick Saban to me that have been like, and now obviously Kirby Smart, but really them two have been the coaches. They've been those two teams have been the teams, and now it really seems like like there's pressure. I think that there's pressure, and obviously Nick Saban. I don't think that you can write off Nick Saban. To me, he's like the Greg Popovich or Bill Belichick of college football. But with their offense, with football, it's tough, and any team sport, it's tough because you have offense and defense, and it's hard when one facet of the game is not up to par. It's hard to win. It just is. So it happens in the NFL, NBA, what have you. So I'm worried about if Alabama can't figure out their offense, which they really haven't to start off the season. I'm honestly picking Ole Miss to win this game
Wow.
because just based on what we've seen, they really just have not come to play. So that's why I'm disagreeing. I just I just don't know if they've figured it out yet. I really don't. So
No,
uh,
no, and that's fair. I'm not officially taking either side in this
right,
game,
yeah,
but I like your take, and if you're looking on the screen right now at home, Ole Miss plus 230, so you're getting, over 2 to 1 odds on your money return. If you're betting them on the money line, you take them plus
yeah,
7, you're getting some points as well. So it's
yeah,
not a bad play, but as you talked about, just haven't really seen it through the first couple weeks for
right.
Alabama, and as both of us huge football fans, if you don't have a good quarterback, it is so hard to win. I don't care how talented you are in every other position. You have to have a capable quarterback to lead this offense. And so far, Bama does not have that. And
So
Ole Miss, yeah,
that's what I was going to bring up just to end our talks about Ole Miss and Alabama. If they end up going back to Jalen Milrow, I mean, now it seems like more than ever, the game is kind of evolving towards mobile quarterbacks. It seems like you need that now. It's getting harder and harder to be just like a pocket passer. Obviously, there's still some great ones out there, but I mean, Jalen Milrow, he showed he is athletic, he's fast. If he can figure out, the accuracy, if he can figure out the passing part, I think that he can be a great quarterback, but they just got to figure it out.
no, and I agree, and I think for Alabama to be successful, it has to be him. I don't see Simpson or Buckner, however you pronounce his name, being the guy at quarterback to lead this Alabama team down the stretch of the season.
Yeah,
SEC, as we know, is a very capable football conference, always competitive matchups, and this
yeah,
will be another one. But I
yeah.
do think Milrow's going to have to be the guy, and we'll see. And this is a great test early on in the season. And, it's crazy how college football has become. If you really just focus only on the playoff, well, guess what? A team like Clemson, a team like Alabama, who we've seen in the spotlight for the last decade or so, their seasons technically are on the line this week because if they
Oh,
lose, their college football playoff
100%.
hopes are
You don't
done,
you
and we're
don't
in
go to the college
September.
football playoff with two losses. I mean,
Yeah, and the crazy thing is it would be September, and their seasons technically in that aspect would be over. So something to definitely watch this week. And, if you are a college football fan, I mean, this is the week for you. So many big
yeah,
time games
if you want to be a pure degenerate, you're betting that Alabama Ole Miss game because there could be some fireworks. It could be, a complete landslide in one direction. Like that I think that that's going to be a fun game for people to make bets on. I do.
for sure, for sure. And we'll
So,
talk about this game. We'll talk about this game, then we'll talk about Texas, and then we'll go to NFL because we don't want to spend too much time on all this college football, but
Yeah,
I mean, we could because there's so
we
many good
could.
games.
I
And yeah, so let's talk about this game because this has to be talked about. This is a huge game in South Bend, Indiana. Ohio State, Notre Dame, both these teams have national championship aspirations. The spread is 3 in favor of Ohio State. This is a big game for our Longhorns as well because one of these teams will probably drop below them in the rankings if Texas hopefully wins against Baylor, and one of these teams obviously has to lose. 3 points could go either way. I haven't seen it really from Ohio State yet, but we don't know because they really haven't played anybody. Same
right.
as Notre Dame, but at least Notre Dame has looked good they're doing what they're
Yeah,
supposed to do against
right.
inferior opponents. This game is
Yeah,
in South Bend, crazy, crazy crowd. Ethan, this is an official play. I'm in on Notre Dame. I think they win this game. I'm taking the money line at plus 124, as we see
interesting.
here on DraftKings.
Interesting. So this is the one thing I'll say about this game. I talked about Nick Saban and Dabo Sweeney before. Ryan Day, that his first, yeah, it's Ryan Day.
Mhm.
You can't write him off. You never can because Ohio State, they're always in there. They're always, in the top 5 for the most part, I feel like. And they just, they when it gets time for the playoff, it just seems like they're just a tiny step below, because they just haven't really been able to get it done. But um I think that this game also huge potential for some fireworks. Sam Hartman, he's the guy. He's been balling. So, and he like it seems like he's got some swagger. It seems like the team kind of rallies around him, and this is I think this is a big year for him. So I like the Notre Dame play. I do.
Yeah, I think they win this game. Another, you talk about the quarterback position. I haven't seen it from Ohio State's quarterback so far. They did look good against a good Western Kentucky team last week, but season opener at Indiana really struggled to score points. They also played a Youngstown State. They struggled at times. They just haven't played anybody, and this is a
Yeah.
really tough test in one of the best college football environments in the country. Going to Notre Dame, this is the back half of a home and home from last year, where
Hmm.
I believe Ohio State won a very low scoring game against Notre Dame, like 17-7 or something.
Yeah.
But I like Notre Dame, and I think with plus money, it's a very good value bet. I think they
Yeah.
win this
So
game.
Ohio State's quarterback Kyle McCord, looking at his stats right now, he's had, I'd say, pretty good stats to start off the year versus Indiana, not so much. But, he had his completion percentage 82%, and then following that, week 2, 70%, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions both games. But you got to think about the competition. The competition
Yeah.
was not there. So you would expect that from really any ranked team to go in against such small schools and dominate like that. But then versus Indiana, who historically really does not have that good of a football program, you know that to me was obviously the biggest test out of the first 3 games. But he completed 60% of his passes, which I'd say is good, but lowest yards per attempt out of the first 3 weeks, and then no touchdowns, 1 interception. So we'll, that's I think a reason why I like your Notre Dame play is because this is his first true test. This Notre Dame team, uh, their coach is a pretty defensive minded guy, right?
Yeah, Marcus Freeman. Yeah.
Marcus Freeman, and that he, like, I remember when he uh first got hired at Notre Dame. People loved his leadership, his inspiration. So I bet that he's going to really get on his guys to go out there and make some plays on the defense. So it's going to be a test. It's going to be a test for McCord for sure.
Yeah, and Notre Dame struggled last year in Marcus Freeman's first year because their quarterback was really, really bad, to say it nicely. And now they have Sam Hartman, the transfer from Wake Forest, and he has been lighting it up for Notre Dame. I know they've played absolutely nobody so far. Their schedules the first couple weeks has been an absolute joke. I've never seen an easier schedule.
Yeah,
Um, but now they get tested, and I think Sam Hartman is that guy for Notre Dame to
yeah,
lead them to the promised land. And to say this, to be honest with you here, Ethan, Notre Dame is not in the conference. You want to make the playoff and not be in a conference? Well, guess what? You got to win this game. You
Yeah,
probably have to run the table because you don't get
truth.
the added advantage, which the committee loves looking at conference champions. Notre Dame doesn't get that, so they have to basically win out to have a chance, and this game would help them do so. I love Notre Dame
And
in this spot, and I
and
think
when
they're going to win.
you mentioned it, one last thing, you mentioned it earlier, if you don't have a good quarterback, nothing's going to happen. It seems like with Sam Hartman versus Kyle McCord, even though uh, Ohio State, in terms of these past several years, has obviously had the better reputation, I would say, than Notre Dame. Even though Notre Dame's a great football team, Sam Hartman is the guy. So, in terms of the battle of the quarterbacks, at least I would take Sam Hartman for sure.
Yeah,
He's got
and
experience and he's a baller.
I agree. So Notre Dame, money line and +3, whatever you want to do. Official play here on the Pure Degeneracy, episode 1. Feels good to say with Adam Glick and Ethan Weingart. Let's get into our team because we both graduated from there. That's how we met.
Yeah,
Texas Baylor last year in the Big 12. Last time these two teams are going to square off in this conference. We head up north. Forget the freeway name, the I-35, maybe?
it's the I-35. Yeah,
Yeah, I-35, head up north, you go past the elusive and the great, Buc-ee's, and, in Temple, Texas. I love that place. I
yes,
could s
sir.
spend hours there.
Of
Texas
course.
Baylor on the road in Waco, 14.5-point spread.
Mhm.
I know Baylor, if you've been following college football this year, Baylor has not looked the part. They also
Nope.
lost to Texas State, who's down the I-35 in
Yep.
San Marcos, Texas from Austin. Not a good look. They looked a lot better against Utah. Probably should have won the game, but they didn't. And here they are trying to pull off what would be a huge upset against the Longhorns of Texas, who have
Yep.
national championship aspirations right now, and they're getting a respective line here of minus 14.5. Weingart, Ethan, what are your thoughts heading into this huge game for Texas to start conference play?
I love it. I really do. I think that, I'd like to think of myself as like an unbiased Texas fan. I like being realistic. Everyone always likes to say Texas is back, and then we get our hearts broken when it doesn't happen. So it's caused me to be a little bit more of a realist. However, you talked about it, you illustrated it perfectly. Baylor has just really not looked the part this year. They lost a lot of key players last year to the draft and what have you. And their coach, is a pretty capable coach, but if you don't have the players, it's tough to develop your guys in just a season. He's going to need some time. And based on what we've seen out of Texas, they looked, I would say the word is interesting versus Wyoming, because they really, for the first 3 quarters, it was way too close of a game. But then in that fourth quarter, they just exploded and they just ran it up. So, I would expect, and also based on just what we've seen out of Texas these first several games, our offense is high powered, our offense is star studded. You would expect, even though it's looked a little inconsistent so far, I am expecting Texas to dominate this game. I am. So I think, Baylor in the past has put up some great fights versus Texas, some wins versus Texas, but this year I think there's just a huge disparity in how our teams are this year. I'm expecting Texas to crush the minus 14.5 line. I am.
I like it. I would hope so, being a Texas fan.
Yep.
The only thing that scares me just a little bit is, you talked about the Wyoming game. The word I would use to describe that game, at least the first 3 quarters of it for Texas, pedestrian, is just
Pedestrian.
the question is, and we've seen it, we've gone to school to Texas all 4 years. They can play to the big teams. They can play for the big moments, but can they dominate for 4 quarters against some quote unquote inferior opponents? And this is the case as you talked about this week with Baylor. The talent level, there's nowhere close to compare these teams. Also, Blake Shapen being out, Baylor's quarterback, it's a huge thing. Baylor has really, really struggled without him. I think Texas should crush them. I really do. But again, they didn't look great against Wyoming. I know Wyoming's not a bad group of 5 team, but still, they're Wyoming, they're not. I think Baylor could give Texas a little bit more trouble, and In college sports, as you know, Ethan, I always respect the team, whoever is at home, because that I think factors into the line a little bit, factors into the game, especially if it's close, because then the crowd gets behind you and it gets nerve wracking.
Oh
I
yeah,
do,
playing against passionate fans,
yeah.
it's tough. It's
It's
tough.
tough, and every team is gonna give Texas their best shot last year in the Big 12. It's just how it's gonna be. I
Right.
do think Texas wins. I do think they win comfortably. But I will take Baylor plus 14.5. I also think a backdoor cover could be in store. We're in the same chat for people that don't know who are watching this huge Texas football chat led by the best ever Mike Kresser leading the charge. But I did say I do think Texas wins this game, and I think they win by double digits. I think they even win probably by 2 touchdowns. But that half point could come into play. 14.5. I'm taking Baylor. I think Baylor loses. If I had to give a score prediction over under a 49.5, I think Texas wins 28 to or let's make it 31 to 17. 31-17. That's my prediction.
Okay. Okay. So I think we're gonna have to agree to disagree there because
Yeah.
maybe I'm just feeling a little more hopeful about. I'm just hoping. I'm hoping that after the Wyoming game because you got to think that they definitely heard the critics there. After a great showing versus Alabama,
Yeah.
no Alabama really again did not kind of look up to the part versus a Wyoming team that we probably should have demolished by 30 plus points. We did not look the part versus a team like that either. So I think that Texas, even though we've had a great start to the season, I think we have something to prove. I think that you talked about it. Everyone's going to try and do their best versus Texas. You got to take that into account as well. And I feel like everyone wants to call Texas their rival. Everyone in the Big 12, I feel like feels like Texas is their huge rival. But I think again, I think the how should I say this? The the other side of me, which I think is leading the charge on my thinking here, is that Texas has something to prove after the Wyoming game, and that we I believe that this 14.5 line should be easily achievable. That's what I think. So
No, and you bring up a good point. Honestly, the Wyoming game and how it played out, it could be a blessing in disguise for Texas this season to never
yeah,
take teams lightly, put the foot on the gas pedal, and keep it
yeah,
going for 4 quarters. And one of the things Texas really struggled with under the coach Steve Sarkisian era so far has been their closeout and their fourth quarter performances. And to their credit, they could have maybe even folded under the pressure in the fourth quarter in a tie game against Wyoming. They didn't. They put their
they
foot on
ran
the
it up.
gas,
I
and
mean,
they
they scored 3 or 4 straight touchdowns.
yeah, and they ran away with that game. The scoreline doesn't do them justice, but it's a credit
Yeah,
to Texas for not letting the pressure get to them, and they were able to come out victorious. So we'll see.
great.
Big game
Yeah,
for
see,
Texas.
yeah, very big.
And with that, Ethan, now we get into some fun
Conditioning.
stuff. The NFL full Sunday slate. Man, waking up every Sunday morning now, I am just thrilled.
I'm
Full
locked
slate,
in.
locked in,
Locked in.
NFL Sunday. It would take, as we've already gone over what I was expecting. So we won't do every single game, but let's touch on some of these closer lines because there are a lot of games this week. To be honest, that are some big lines where I think some of the favorites should win comfortably. But the first game we'll touch on because it is your team, and I don't want to leave them be. Jaguars and
That's very nice of
Texans.
you. Yeah.
Ethan, we'll also play a little segment here before we wrap up the show at the end once we're done talking about these games. Survivor Challenge, which I'm sure I've told you about before. This
Oh
is my
yeah.
survivor pick. So your Texans better not upset the Jaguars this week.
Yeah, so I am very confident that we will not. I think, I'm watching every single Texans game. We're, as I said to start the podcast, are struggling with injuries right now, especially in the secondary and on our offensive line. So, we lost last week versus the Colts, but our offense did look very, very good, even without I think 4 out of our 5 offensive linemen and quality offensive linemen. I'm not just saying that because I'm a Texans fan. You got Laramie Tunzel didn't play, and then our first round rookie from last year, Kenyon Green, out for the year. Titus Howard, who's we just signed to a huge extension, out. I think for either 4 or 6 weeks to start the year. It's tough, you know. And then on defense, I talked about Jimmy Ward. I think he's going to play this week actually, but he hasn't played. Jalen Petrie injured last week. Derek Stingley injured, I think either today or yesterday in practice, and he's supposed to be out 6 to 8 weeks. So these are key players on both sides of the ball that an already not that good Texans team is losing. And I had like I'm not saying that I had high hopes for the like playoff hopes for the Texans this year, but I was and still am, even with the injuries, expecting a significant improvement from last year's record of, I believe, 4-11. But versus the Jaguars look, I mean, just on talent alone, they look great. I mean, Trevor Lawrence seems like he's getting better every single year. Now Calvin Ridley back in the fold. Travis Etienne, I have him on my fantasy. Big believer in him. They've got some ballers, and just with all these injuries against the Texans, I don't know. My hopes are grim. They are. My hopes are grim. But in terms of the Texans, our defensive line looks pretty good. Our linebacker core looks pretty good. It's just not having a complete secondary can just be brutal. So if I was the Jaguars, I would want to take some shots. If Travis Etienne can, get through some holes, no one's going to catch him. Especially, if they, what always kills the Texans is getting good quality running backs who can catch the ball out of the backfield, one on one versus linebackers. No one's going to catch Travis Etienne in the passing game either. So this line is -9. I'm expecting the Jaguars to hit that pretty comfortably. I'm expecting at least a 2 touchdown win, if not more. Unfortunately, because I love the Texans.
Yeah, and I honestly I think this game could be closer. I was pleased with some of the way the Texans did play last week. I watched a lot of that game where I
Hmm.
was in Vegas. They had it on, and the offense looked good. As you talked about, though, just a lot of injuries. It's
It's
hard
tough.
to it's hard to trust them in this kind of
Yeah,
game. They're on the road. I know Jacksonville doesn't have a great home
yeah,
field environment in the NFL, but, the Jags are an interesting team. They kinda remind me a little bit like Texas a little bit where they play to their competition. They really struggled last week on offense against the Chiefs. They were
it did.
very winnable football game, but they just couldn't find ways to put the ball in the end zone,
Hmm.
and Trevor Lawrence is getting better. I This is where we might disagree a little bit. I don't think he is that great of a quarterback. He does have a lot of weapons, though. Calvin Ridley, I think.
I don't think he's like necessarily an elite quarterback either. I just think he's getting better, and especially under Doug Peterson,
Yeah.
I think that he should continue to keep getting better, even if it takes him, longer than maybe like a Justin Herbert or like a Jalen Hurts or someone like that. I think that he will be a lot better. But you're right. You're right for sure.
No, he definitely has a lot of tools and
Mhm.
people under him that I think will help him in his progression moving
Yeah,
forward in the NFL.
right.
9-point spread, I'm not this is not an official play. I would probably lean Texans, but in this game, it's hard to say. I do think Jacksonville wins this game. They better win this game is the bottom line
Yeah,
for my survivor. But I do think it's going to be closer than people think. And I'm not super high on Jacksonville. We'll see how this game unfolds.
yeah,
But if the Texans want to be in this game, I think it has to play to a lower scoring football game. You got to limit Jacksonville to field goals instead of touchdowns. And if it's close, you never know. NFL, we see this all the time, week in and week out. Crazy things happen, and anyone could really beat anyone. So we will see with the Texans and the Jags. So I'm looking at the slate here. What's the next game you would like to talk about, Ethan? Is if you have
Well, you know what would be a really interesting game? Scroll back up a little bit. The
Mhm,
Ravens and the Colts. I mean,
mhm.
that's like a Lamar Jackson versus the new Lamar Jackson type of game. And assuming that Anthony Richardson can play because he had the concussion versus the Texans, I would expect this game to be fantastic. I would, even though the Colts, I think, probably are not a playoff team this year. If I had to guess, um, they've got some work to do, but I would expect a lot of running. Anthony Richardson, and just based on what everyone's been saying about him, it seems like he has the leadership quality of like a Roman general. Like it seems like he is just the guy, and if the Colts make a run in the future, he seems like the perfect guy to do it. It seems like he's grinding the practice facility, all the time, like as much time that he can put in there. I like the Colts a lot, but as of right now, you would obviously want to, I would say, go with the Ravens as they have the experience. Even though J.K. Dobbins is done for the year, we talked about at the beginning so many injuries going on. Gus Edwards has proven to be, what J.K. Dobbins has been hurt before, and when that happens, it seems like the Baltimore running game doesn't really skip a beat, especially with Lamar Jackson. And now that Lamar Jackson has Zay Flowers has really come to play this year. I don't know if Odell Beckham's playing this year. I vaguely remember him having either like an ankle injury or something like that. He may not play, but getting him in the fold, also deep threat Rashad Bateman. They don't really, I feel like he involve him as much as they should, but I think that he's a pretty quality receiver. I feel pretty comfortable with the Ravens at -8.
Yeah, I do too. I actually love this over 44 points. The
I
Colts have given
I
up
love it. I
a
love it.
lot of points, but to their credit, they've also been really good on offense.
Mhm.
I wasn't high at all on Anthony Richardson before the season, but I've been really impressed what he's been doing in the first couple weeks in the NFL. Just his running ability, able to read defenses, their pressures, their schemes. But the Colts have surprised me a little bit. The question though is he healthy enough to play? Hopefully, he is this week. The Ravens. They've looked the part. They have. They played obviously the first week they played, I think it was the Texans,
Yeah, yeah. It
and
was
they
the
won. They pulled away in the second half.
Yep.
And then last week they played the Bengals and they won that game as well. The
Yeah,
question will be how good are the Bengals starting
yeah.
off 0
We can talk
2.
about that game next.
Yeah, very surprising, but I do think the Ravens is a good spot to bet the over in this game, maybe even
Yep.
tease it if you're scared of the 44. I do like both offenses to get it going. On the line aspect, I do favor the Ravens, but it probably wouldn't bet -8. I love this over. I'm betting that's an official play. Over 44 in the Ravens and the Colts. And,
I love that
as
as well.
yeah,
I do.
and we'll get into this game. It's a really another interesting
Yeah,
game. Uh
sure.
Actually, I clicked on the wrong one. It's sorta interesting. I wanna talk to you about the Bengals. Who are they playing this week?
Uh,
Oh, they're Monday night. Wow. So we'll save them. We'll save them. Let's go
are you
to
sure? Both of those games, I think the Bengals game, I understand why you want to talk about that more. So let's talk about both. Let's do it. So
okay.
what game first? That one? Let's
Yeah,
do
we'll
it.
start Browns Titans.
Yeah. So, oh boy. Me being the Texans fan that I am, Deshaun Watson, we could talk a lot about on the field, off the field, what's going on with Deshaun, but we'll stick to the on the field stuff for sure. You know, to start off the season, not good. Not good. Obviously, with the Texans, regardless of what was going on, he was an elite quarterback. His running ability, his deep ball accuracy. I loved Deshaun Watson on the Texans. When he originally requested the trade, I was heartbroken, but then all the allegations started coming out, and then I, obviously flipped the script. But I was expecting him this year. Here's the thing, what I'll say about him, early on in his career, it looked so promising. He tore his ACL, and it took him a while to kind of shake the rust off. It did. So I remember, the season following his ACL, he looked a little rusty the first several games. And now, he's missed a year and a half of playing football, and that's tough to come back, even though he's freakishly athletic and he's a great quarterback. He has not looked the part. And the Titans defense, the Browns are favored by 3.5, but the Titans defense definitely has come to play this year. Um, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was watching that Steelers Browns game. It was
Yeah,
really entertaining on
it
Monday
was
night.
great.
It was a
Fantastic.
great game, and how it started with the pick six, first play of the game.
Mhm.
But as you talked about it with Deshaun, I just he hasn't been great this year. I just don't love his weapons that he has to throw to.
I don't
You know,
either.
you have Amari Cooper. You have Donovan Peoples-Jones, as well.
And so Elijah Moore, I
Yeah,
still have, it's early on in the season, obviously. I still have high hopes for Elijah Moore because apparently he had a great preseason. He had a great training camp. He got recently acquired from the Jets where it just didn't really pan out for him. And I think they have high hopes for him. I have him on my fantasy team on my bench on one of them. He was targeted, I think, 9 times, three catches, so him and Deshaun, I think, still have to work on some chemistry. But if they can get Elijah Moore going, fantastic. If they can get Deshaun going, fantastic. It's going to be tough. Obviously, no Nick Chubb. We talked about that before. That injury was brutal. But they did sign Kareem Hunt, who I think that if he can work his way up to a feature back role, he should, maybe he could revert back to how he was with the Chiefs. I don't know. It's been several years. But why I like the Browns a lot is their defense. I mean, their defense, I say this all the time before, the pre Deshaun Watson era with Baker Mayfield, that group of players is a Super Bowl team. I firmly believe that Baker, people say he was hurt. I don't, I'm not going to. The truth is Baker did not play up to, how he should have been playing. I think that if he would have played better, they would have been a Super Bowl team. I mean, you can't have a team with like Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, Chubb, and then all these guys on defense who for the most part are still there, right? You got, Myles Garrett, and the secondary is incredible. I mean, you got Denzel Ward, Del Pitt, Newsome, like all these guys that are very, very quality, players. I like their defense a lot, and I have them on my fantasy too. I'm sticking with them. So, um, let's see these individual.
I pulled this up, Ethan, because I
Yeah,
found this really interesting,
yeah,
and I might just throw, point 0.1 units on this just for fun.
uh huh.
Browns defense plus 750 to score a touchdown. I think this is gonna be a defensive a slugfest,
I do too.
dogfight.
I do
Both
too.
these defenses are really, really good, as you
Yeah,
talked about the weapons on the defensive line, the secondary is loaded for the Browns. This game is
yep,
in Cleveland. I like the Browns with the spread in this spot as well. I think the Titans are a very similar team in a lot of aspects to the Browns, but I think they're more of a B version of the Browns. I think the Browns are a better football team. They're more explosive on the offense. And I know he's been around and he's been productive for longer a little bit, Ryan Tannehill with the Titans. I trust Deshaun more, honestly, and I think he has better weapons at his disposal. And I know the Titans were victorious last week in a great game against the Chargers, but pretty sure the Chargers games at this point are just strictly scripted every single week for them to lose in the most heartbreaking way possible. Doesn't matter who they're playing.
yeah,
It's just unbelievable to me, but that's another story for another time. I do think the Browns win this game. I like them to cover. I also like their defense to shine. If you have them on your fantasy team, as you talked about,
yeah.
this is a good spot to play them for
the
sure.
the the big question is for me is if DeAndre Hopkins is playing this week. I just looked on my phone. It seems like he's going to play. It seems like he's going to play. He was limited today in practice after getting a full day yesterday. Um, I think people are writing off DeAndre a little too early. I think that he's had he had the steroid issue where he missed several games, and then he got hurt really for the first time in his career. He had injury concerns. That's what I mean. But I think that he is still, he's in his early 30s. I think he's still an elite wide receiver. The problem is with Tennessee, they got Derrick Henry, obviously. They're a very run first heavy team. If and now, now that I think about it, I may backtrack that because, Denzel Ward is no man to mess with either. So I think that the DeAndre Hopkins versus Denzel Ward matchup will be very telling about how this game goes. I do.
Yeah, and you always have to monitor these injuries in the NFL till as much as Sunday morning because things are
Yeah.
changing on the fly. So definitely something to monitor and look out for before betting this game for sure.
Yeah.
Let's touch on this game. This is a big game, Monday Night Football.
Huge.
A team in the Cincinnati Bengals that you don't like to use this word this early in the season, the M word, but it's basically a must-win for the Cincinnati Bengals against the Los Angeles Rams. 0-2 to start their offensively. I used this word earlier with Texas in the Wyoming game. Their offenses look very pedestrian so far in
Pedestrian.
the
Yep.
early going, and the line is indicating that they don't have a lot of faith in the Bengals. They're a 3-point favorite, and usually the MO in the betting world is in NFL and college, you're getting about 3 points in favor of you of the home team. So they're thinking that this game's basically a toss up. I know the Rams have actually been sneakily okay. Nakua from BYU is an absolute animal. I just
Yep.
picked him up on one of my fantasy teams because
For
he
you.
is him.
Solid.
Um,
Yeah.
but this is really very interesting football game, and
Yeah.
I like the Bengals to get it done, but I would not feel confident in this game. I also think
I
this
wouldn't
is a
either.
big Jamar Chase game for me as well.
Huge. I have Jamar Chase. I had Jamar Chase last year. I have him again on one of my leagues this year, maybe two. Nope, just one. It's tough with three teams, and now I'm actually in four teams. But I
A lot.
definitely have him. Definitely have him in one league. He has not looked the part at all. Obviously that first week, tough weather conditions, understandable. But what I will say about the Rams is they really have come to play these past couple weeks. I mean, everyone always wants to talk about how Sean McVay is such a fantastic coach. Last year, the Rams really did not look that great. Obviously, Matthew Stafford had his injuries, and Allen Robinson did not really come to play. It seems like this year, now that especially after the heavy rumors coming out that they're letting Cam Akers go, seems like their only really two star players are an aging Matthew Stafford and Aaron Donald, also who's like on the verge of retirement every single year now. However, McVay's play calling is unbelievable. I mean, they're Cooper Cup injured. Obviously, Cooper Cup, I should not have forgotten him. He's a star as well. But he gets hurt. He's injured. Puka Nakua, this dude. I mean, I was watching some of the Rams highlights. Sean McVay is calling every single play you can imagine to get this guy open, and he has been capitalizing for sure. So it's I think that in terms of talent, the Bengals have a great coach. The Bengals have, a lot of talent, even though it really has not looked that great. McVay's play calling, though, has been elite. I feel like he's back to the McVay that people know. So I understand why this line is tough, and I understand why you don't want to bet it because I really don't know anymore. Like the Rams seem like a team that should be 0-2. They are not. Wait, are they 2
1
and
and 1.
0?
One.
They lost to the 49ers, right? But they
Yeah.
put up a fight against the 49ers, at least for like I was at a bar, I believe, when that game was going on, and I remember glancing over to the TV. I don't remember what the final score was, so I won't
They
speak on
were
it.
winning.
They were winning and it was
Yeah.
close. Like they put up a fight versus the 49ers. So no. Didn't I just talk about they lost by a touchdown, I believe. They lost.
Yes.
Yeah, they
Once
lost.
you finish your point, I'll bring up something in that game, for this podcast that I think really fits in.
Let's do it. Yeah, 30. So that is the point. 30-23. 49ers, they probably should not be beating the 49ers, even though it was a close game. I think that, I'm excited to see what this Rams team can do against the Bengals. I'm excited to see if the Bengals can turn it around. Yes, that's the point.
Yeah, no, this is gonna be a game where you just I mean, if you wanna bet it, go ahead. I don't know if I will. We'll see on Monday when I ultimately decide to do in this game. I would favor the Bengals, but as you talked about,
Mhm.
McVay is back to doing McVay things, and his play calling has been incredible. Nakua on these slant routes is OP. I mean, he is just
Michael
open
Thomas.
automatically, it
Yep.
seems like every single time, but, what I wanted to quickly harp on and mention a little bit, Ethan, in that Rams-Niners game, Rams were winning and went back and forth a little bit. Niners did take control a little bit in the second half, but at the
Mhm.
end of the game, the Niners were winning by 10 points. The spread was 7.5 Niners, and with 4 seconds left, the Rams are maybe at the 30-yard line of the Niners.
Mhm.
The game's over. Just throw a Hail Mary or just run, whatever you gotta do. Well, guess what they do
Field goal, right?
instead? They kick a field
Right.
goal
I saw that.
at the buzzer,
Yep.
and a lot of people on social media, including myself, are wondering to the betting gods and to Vegas, what's going on here? What's the point of kicking a field goal? So if you bet the Rams, you cashed. If you bet the Niners, you're thinking about what am I going to do next with my life? Because that is a horrible slash incredible beat at the same time, whatever side that you're on.
Isn't that
But
the beauty of sports betting? Things can be horrible and incredible.
yeah, it's literally that's the thrill of sports betting. Always
Right.
bet within your means,
Of
but
course.
if you're on the winning side of that beat, I mean, that is the best feeling maybe in the world that
Yeah.
you can get in that game. But I
Yeah.
do think the Bengals win this game just because they're gonna be so desperate to win. It's
Yeah.
basically a must win
Yeah.
already in week 3. They're at home under the lights in prime time. I do think they get it done. I would also favor the under in this game. We'll talk about this more and more as the weeks go on. I'll pull up some numbers when we get into our second episode next week. I really want to see how this primetime slate goes this week in the NFL. Primetime unders hit at about 65-70% rate the last few years. We'll see how it goes the next
Yeah.
couple of primetime slates Thursday night, Sunday night, and Monday night this
This is
week.
this is the last thing I wanna say about the Rams Bengals. I just did a weather check.
Mhm.
Seems like
Oh, that's
things
important.
should be okay. It seems like high of 78, cloudy. No rain though. No rain though. So they're you talked about must-win situation. You're really hoping that the Bengals offense can find their stride this week.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, Ethan. Always check the weather reports for
Huge.
games that are not playing in domes in the
Huge.
NFL. It completely changes the dynamic of the football game
Yeah.
for both sides. If you're
Massive.
especially you're betting it and you wanna bet props, you wanna bet spreads, you wanna bet over unders, you have to
Yep.
check the weather
You
if the
you
game is.
mentioned in the beginning my touchdown parlay, rookie mistake, didn't check the weather. I bet, Jamar Chase, easy touchdown. I thought Joe Mixon, easy touchdown. Even Nick Chubb, easy touchdown. It was Browns versus Bengals, but that weather was so bad. I mean, none of it hit because
Mhm.
I think weather obviously had a huge part to play in that. So that's something we keep in the back of our minds as we move along. Weather, huge,
Yeah.
super important, super important.
Before we wrap up, Ethan, this has been a lot of fun. For I think both of us doing the first ever episode. We'll do some, work out some kinks and stuff. Always things to
Course.
work on. It's been longer than maybe other episodes will be. We'll see how this goes. There's
Yeah.
just a lot to
We
talk
had a
about.
lot to talk about this first week. We really
Yeah.
did.
But we'll see how we go and how we do in the betting world as well. But before we go, I want to do two things with you, Ethan. First,
Okay.
I want to do a survivor challenge, just bit
Sure.
for fun between the two of us, where we pick one
Sure.
NFL team every week to win. See how long we go here on this show, and
Okay.
you can't pick the same team twice.
Yep.
So we'll do that, and then at the very after that, before we wrap up, we'll do one best bet from each of us
Okay.
for the week, and hopefully we win those every single week, and then
Right.
we'll wrap up. Okay, with
Let's
that being
do it.
said, I talked about this earlier when we were going over the Jags-Texans game.
Mhm.
Jacksonville is my survivor pick. I think they win. I don't think it's gonna be pretty, honestly, but I do think they get it done. Ethan, who do you think is good? Who's your team this week?
Do me a solid and pull up all the games again.
Yes, I will do you a solid. Very important to know all the games being played.
Just
Um,
just so I can get this line. Um, well, you don't want to take. I like your strategy of taking like not obviously you don't want to take any elite teams this early on
Yeah,
in
the
the season.
obvious plays would be Chiefs and Cowboys, but I'm personally trying to save both of them.
Yep, that's smart.
So,
That's
but
smart.
yeah,
You know what? How about um I'm thinking about maybe taking your team, the Chargers, versus the Broncos. Oh, no, 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 wait, go who I misread. Who are the Chargers playing this.
Dolphins. That could be a sneaky good
Oh,
pick.
the
Dolphins
Chargers.
at home against the Broncos.
No, no, no,
Chargers,
no.
no,
Who are the Chargers playing?
no. I am going to highly say no to that. They're playing the Vikings, and they're
Vikings?
1 point underdogs.
Okay, so maybe not. Because I feel like the Chargers the Chargers have had these heartbreaking
Yeah,
situations and their offense can step up. Their defense can step up. Um, so maybe that's not the best pick.
I will just say that the biggest thing why I'm against it is last year I lost. How I got eliminated in Survivor was early in the year, earliest I've ever been eliminated. Chargers, I picked them at home against Jacksonville, and they got massacred. They lost by 30 something points or so,
Oh, no.
something like that.
That is the worst feeling.
Yeah.
Okay, so you know what I'm gonna do? I'll take the Ravens this week.
It's a good pick.
I'll
Yeah.
take the Ravens this week because we talked about it. Should be a fun game. It's kind of like the I obviously don't know how close, if at all, Lamar Jackson and Anthony Richardson are, but it seems like this is like the master versus the apprentice here. Should be a fun game, but obviously you would take the more experienced and definitely better team in the Ravens to take this week. So I think I'll pick the Ravens.
No, that's a good pick. Good analogy as well. So Ravens and Jaguars are both our survivor picks here on the Pure Degeneracy episode 1. So with that, let's get into our last and final segment here. Our best bets. It can be in anything, honestly. If
Sure.
we don't even have to do just football, but we'll, at least for me, my pick will be in football, but it will be in college.
Yeah.
My
Okay.
pick this week, yeah, I put it on the spreadsheet on the Google Doc, Ethan. The Middle Tennessee Blue Raiders, excuse me. It is a nuke mid-major -2 bet of the year for myself, Adam Glick. They're playing Colorado State, and Colorado State threw the woodworks at Colorado, and they kept it close. They
Did.
should have won the game, and give credit to them. They were not a good football team, to say the least. Jay Norvell, their head coach, was phenomenal in his game plan going into that Colorado game. But as much as they were looked good and everything in that game, a little deflating that they were not able to come away with a victory against a rival like Colorado. And I think going all the way to Muffsboro, Tennessee, long trip for them. Also, by the way, there's another Bucky's there. I went there one time, and now I'm off topic as the phone, of course, is ringing again. But that line, there were maybe 10,000 people in that Bucky's in Muffsboro, Tennessee, where Middle Tennessee University is located.
It's such a good franchise,
Yeah,
bro.
I know. I could go off topic so many different ways here, but stay on topic. Middle Tennessee -2 is my pick of the week, nuke of the year. Ride it with me, please. This is a mega max 10 unit play for me. I never do this ever. 5 units usually a max play, but I'm doing 10 units. Obviously, bet responsibly and make sure you are bankroll management when it comes to sports betting. But
Yep.
10 units is a big play for me. I'm really confident in it. With that, Ethan, what's
Awesome.
your best bet?
So you guys are going to, I think, see as these podcasts go along that Mr. Glick here, he has this specialty for college sports. I would say, uh, more passionate about our professional sports here, but I think we're gonna stick in college for me as
Okay.
well. We talked about we have differing opinions on how this UT versus Baylor game is going to go. I'm thinking that I'm going to take that UT minus 14 and a half. I think we both brought up some very solid points about why we think the game is going to go the way it's going to go. But again, I am confident that UT, even though I feel like I'm a realistic UT fan, I'm thinking that we're going to see Quinn Ewers step up, throw some bombs, and get our receivers a lot more involved than they were against Wyoming. So I'm going to take that UT minus 14 and a half.
I love it. I love it. Before we go here, Ethan, this was a lot of fun. Any final thoughts? We get football, another huge football weekend. Can't wait.
I think that this, obviously you talked about, we'll probably end up working out some kinks and stuff like that. I know for sure we talked a lot, and I want to take notes on what we cover so that we can keep track of how we're doing.
Yeah.
And that's something that I'm definitely going to start doing. I'm super excited to get this thing rolling. I'm super excited. Win or lose, obviously we want to be winning. We're confident about the bets that we're placing, and obviously that will drive the viewership if we're winning. But win or lose, it's so fun to just kind of be in this environment, talking about sports, predicting what we think is going to happen. That's the dream. So if we can keep this going, fantastic. And I'm just excited to see how things shape up.
Yeah, and I agree with everything you said. It's just nice to also go off one another, to have another person to talk about, bounce ideas and predictions off of each other in the sports
Mhm.
world. Because as
Yep.
everyone knows, sports are crazy, but they're a lot of fun. And
That's why people love sports, because
yeah,
they're crazy. Like, there could be a team that is the underdog of underdogs, and then they pull it off. It happens.
it
So
happens.
it's a
That's why we love it.
Yep.
But yeah, with that, we'll see how we do. Again, if you want to be a profitable and good sports bettor, you got to hit about around 53 to 55%. So that's going to be our goal. Obviously, if we could do better than that, that would be incredible. But
Yep.
our goal is to be profitable for you. So
Yep.
hopefully, we gave you some good picks for this first week and
Yeah.
here on the podcast, and hopefully, we'll get better throughout the year.
And another quick point, me and you had some friendly disagreements, as this first episode went along. I think that's a good thing, because to all the sports bettors out there who are hopefully we're going to bring in, and they'll be listening to us. My hope is that, whether or not we agree or not, that we can both, lend forth some good opinions on both sides to really help you make, the best sports get. I'm very into playing poker, sports betting, poker, whatever it have you. It's all educated guessing, so we want to make you we want to, I guess, give you the ability to make the best educated guesses that we can, regardless of, if we agree or not. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, and there's so many people in the space out there, but we really think that we can offer some really good knowledge, especially in our age demographic for
Yep.
even, and I think it's good that we have two kind of different types of sports bettors up and coming. I would say new one that, not going to bet huge games, but really just trying to learn and grow in the space, but has a lot of betting experience in general. And yourself, Ethan, hopefully I didn't misspeak there. And then myself, who's been doing this for a little while,
Yep.
doesn't mean I know everything, but just I have a lot of knowledge and I want to share that with you and
Yep.
hopefully help everyone out. And as you talked about, it's really nice to have two different ideas on the same game because that's why their lines are out there. Every game, there's going to be one person that thinks this way and the other person that thinks the other way.
100%,
Yeah.
100%. And yeah, even though, I am definitely a lot newer to the sports betting arena, I think that just having a passion for, I honestly have barely sports bet up until this point, but we've been talking for an hour and 15 minutes now, purely based on the passion that we both have for the sports. So even if you're not a big sports better, you may not want a sports bet. That's obviously totally okay. We're passionate about sports. We're going to talk sports, and that's a big part of this podcast too. So
Yeah, well, I mean, we just over hour 15 of just purely sports. Obviously, maybe 30 to seconds to a minute on Bucky's, which is an incredible institution, and we will highlight that and one day hopefully get a sponsorship with Bucky's.
that'd be great.
But
That'd be
yeah,
amazing.
mainly sports, and it's been a lot of fun. So for myself, Adam Glick, for Ethan Weingart, and the Pure Degeneracy podcast slash YouTube channel video, episode 1. We are signing out. Enjoy the NFL and college football slate, and we will see you back here on YouTube Thursday next week. Have a good one, everyone.
Yep.